At my engagement dinner, my sister leaned in and said, "Here's to the boy who will probably get left at the altar." My mom laughed. "Don't say that." I didn't react. That night, I reversed the payment for her semester abroad. But at 8:40 a.m., they got the real news. Her flight was canceled and her visa revoked. She texted me in all caps. I always thought my family's worst trait was their inability to take anything seriously. But that night at my engagement dinner, I learned it was worse than that. We'd chosen a small Italian restaurant downtown. I'd gone there since my early 20s, back when I was broke and could only afford pasta and tap water. The owner, Marco, had known me for years and made sure we got the big table near the window. Julie was thrilled. She'd spent the past week talking about how our families could finally meet, how it would be the start of a new chapter. I didn't have the heart to tell her that, with my family, new chapters usually turned into disasters. The night started fine. My dad was telling a story from his fishing trip. My uncle was on his second glass of wine and already slurring compliments at Julie. Even my mom seemed to be in a good mood. Julie's parents were polite and warm, though I could tell they were slightly overwhelmed by how loud my family was. Then, dessert came. The waiter had just set down a plate of tiramisu in front of me when Emily leaned across the table. She was smiling that fake smug smile she wore when she thought she was clever. "Here's to the boy who will probably get left at the altar." It landed like a gunshot. Julie's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My mom burst out laughing and said, "Don't say that," as if it was some kind of innocent joke. Nobody told Emily to stop. My cousin Matt smirked into his wine glass. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at Emily. I just kept eating. But under the table, I felt Julie's hand squeeze mine. She leaned closer and, in a low voice, meant for me but audible enough for my mom to hear, said, "That's not funny. Not even close." Emily rolled her eyes. "Relax. It's a joke." Julie set her fork down. "Do you have any idea how rude that is? You're sitting here at your brother's engagement dinner making bets on whether he'll get married, and you think that's funny?" The table went quiet for a moment, but my mom broke it with, "Oh, come on. You need to learn not to take things so seriously." Julie didn't back down. "And you need to learn how to show some basic respect." That was the moment I knew Julie wasn't just marrying me. She was going to war for me, and something in me snapped. For years, I'd been the one quietly picking up their bills, fixing their messes, making sure no one fell apart financially. They thought I was some dependable background character in their lives, a wallet they could mock without consequence. They'd forgotten who covered Emily's rent when she couldn't find a job, who paid for Mom's new water heater when hers broke, who covered Matt's DUI fines so he wouldn't lose his license. They'd taken so much from me that they'd stopped seeing it as generosity. They saw it as my job. That night, after Julie and I got home, I didn't rant. I didn't yell. I just told her, "I'm done letting them treat me like this." She nodded without hesitation. I opened my laptop. Emily's semester abroad, Spain, for 6 months was supposed to start next week. I'd paid the tuition 3 days ago. I called the program, sat on hold for 40 minutes, and reversed the payment. The email confirmation came through just after midnight. Enrollment canceled. Balance unpaid. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. Julie just kissed me on the shoulder and said, "This is going to be interesting." The next morning, at 8:40, the storm hit. I was making coffee when Julie's phone lit up on the counter. She glanced at it, frowned, and then looked at me. "Emily's blowing up my phone." I took a sip without asking why. Julie slid the phone across the counter. The text was in all caps. "My flight is canceled. They said my visa is revoked." "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just went back to pouring coffee into my mug. Less than a minute later, my own phone buzzed. Same text, followed by, "Call me now." Then came a string of question marks, one after the other, as if she thought spamming punctuation would magically make me respond. Julie read over my shoulder, "Visa revoked." That's impressively fast. I shrugged. Guess the tuition reversal wasn't just a hiccup. Without payment, the school pulled her paperwork. No enrollment, no student visa. By 8:45, Mom was calling. I let it go to voicemail. She immediately called again. Then Emily. Then Matt. Then my uncle. It was like they'd started some emergency phone tree. I flipped my phone face down on the table and went back to making toast. Julie was watching me like I was performing some kind of art piece. You're really not going to answer? Nope. They can wait. By 9, the tone started shifting. Mom sent a text. Emily's future is at risk. You need to fix this right now. Family helps family. Julie read it and shook her head. Where was this family helps family stuff last night when they were publicly betting on whether you'd even get married? At 9:15, the group chat I'd been dragged into months ago lit up. Matt wrote, "If this is about last night, you're being dramatic." My aunt followed with, "We don't air dirty laundry in front of outsiders." Julie didn't even ask me before grabbing my phone typing. Then, "Maybe don't create dirty laundry in the first place," and hitting send. I didn't stop her. At 9:30, Emily must have realized she wasn't getting anywhere with me, so she called Julie instead. Julie answered and put it on speaker. Emily's voice came out hot. "Did you convince him to do this?" Julie stayed steady. "No. He decided you don't get to insult him and still expect his help. Honestly, I think he's been more than generous by not listing every other thing he's paid for you. You're ruining my life." "You managed that yourself," Julie said, and ended the call without waiting for a reply. I sat there, coffee in hand, thinking how no one in my family had ever been told something like that and actually had to hear it. Usually, I'd smooth things over before it got ugly, but not this time. By 11:45, Mom sent one final text. "If you don't fix this, don't bother coming to Sunday dinner." Julie read it, looked at me, and said, "Perfect. That means we can actually enjoy our Sundays now." The rest of the day, the calls didn't stop, but something was different. They were nervous now. It was the first time in years they'd realized they couldn't control me. By Saturday morning, barely 24 hours after Emily's first all-caps meltdown, the family group chat looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. Messages were flying in faster than I could scroll. Matt kicked things off at 8:15 with, "Maybe if we all chip in, she can still make it." That was almost funny. This is the same guy who borrowed $2,000 from me last year and hasn't paid back a dime. Then my aunt chimed in with, "She'll miss out on so many memories. You wouldn't take that from your own sister, would you?" As if I'd stolen her passport myself in the dead of night. By 8:30, Mom was sending me links to budget airlines with captions like, "Look, these are under $600. We can make this work if you just send the money, the way she said we meant you." And we both knew it. Julie sat next to me, sipping coffee, scrolling through the chaos like she was reading a tabloid. They still think this is a bluff. They think if they throw enough guilt your way, you'll fold like you always have. They don't get it yet. I said, "This isn't about money anymore." Around 10, Emily changed her approach. Gone was the rage. Now, it was a 5-paragraph essay about how the semester abroad was her once-in-a-lifetime chance, and without it, she'd fall behind in her career. Julie glanced at it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Her career? She's changed majors more times than I've changed my Netflix password." By 11, I got a message from someone I didn't expect. My cousin Rachel. She's one of the few who stayed out of the family drama over the years, but her text was blunt. "Everyone's freaking out because you've always been the one holding everything together. You don't pay, the whole system falls apart." It hit different, seeing it laid out in plain words. I'd always known it, but now I could feel the truth of it. The panic wasn't just about Emily's trip. It was about the fact that I'd finally proven I was willing to let them fail. That evening, Julie and I went out for dinner. Halfway through our meal, my phone buzzed. Mom was calling. This time, her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. "Lucas, can we just talk?" "Sure," I said, "but nothing's changing." She went on about how Emily had been crying all day, calling every relative in her contacts, begging for help. She said the whole thing was embarrassing for the family. Julie leaned toward the phone. Embarrassing is what happened at the engagement dinner. Mom pretended not to hear her and said, "She's your sister. You can't just let her miss this opportunity." "I can," I said. "And I am." Then I ended the call before she could try the sympathy angle. When we got home, I had 3 new texts from different relatives. All variations of, "We didn't think you'd actually go through with it." That was the first moment I realized I'd crossed a line they didn't think I was capable of crossing. They weren't just annoyed anymore. They were nervous. And nervous people start making mistakes. By Sunday morning, the tone had shifted. Friday night had been jokes. Saturday had been guilt trips. Now it was full-on negotiation mode. At 8:05, Matt sent me a voice message. He spoke slowly, like he was choosing every word carefully. "Look, man, I know we've had issues about me paying you back in the past, but if you can cover Emily's tuition, I'll get you what I owe, plus interest. It would have been touching if I didn't know he had about $42 in his checking account and was currently living in his friend's basement." At 8:20, my aunt texted, "We could cover her housing in Spain. That way you'd only have to handle tuition." She even followed it with a little heart emoji like a pink cartoon symbol would erase the years of passive-aggressive comments and funny jabs at my expense. By 9, Mom called. Julie answered this time, putting it on speaker without even asking me. Mom's voice was sharp and businesslike. "Lucas needs to think about the bigger picture. If Emily can't finish her degree, it reflects badly on all of us as a family." Julie didn't even flinch. "You're worried about how it looks. You should have been worried about that when you toasted to your son getting dumped at his own engagement dinner." There was a long pause. Then Mom tried something I didn't expect. "What if I pay you back? I mean, it might take a while, but I'll get the money to you eventually." I laughed, not kindly. "You've been getting the money to me eventually since I was 21. Hasn't happened yet." She didn't argue. She just hung up. By 10, things took a weird turn. My cousin Rachel, the one who stayed mostly neutral, texted again. "You should check Facebook. Emily's posting about you. And it's a lot." Julie pulled it up on her phone while I was buttering toast. She scrolled, then let out a low whistle. "Wow." She went for the jugular. It was a long post, 4 paragraphs, tagging half the family and several old classmates. Emily painted me as jealous, insecure, controlling, someone who can't stand to see anyone else succeed. She said I sabotaged her future because I was afraid of being upstaged by my younger sister. But here's the part she clearly hadn't thought through. In trying to prove how much I'd supposedly held her back, she listed every single major expense I'd ever covered for her. Rent for 2 years, the down payment on her car, 2 different semesters of tuition, the Cancun trip she bragged about for months. All of it, in her own words, on a public post. Julie was grinning as she read. "She basically wrote your resume as the only reason she's ever had opportunities in her adult life." By 1, the comments started rolling in. Not from strangers, from mutual friends and extended family, and they weren't taking her side. One person wrote, "If my brother did even half of that for me, I'd be grateful for life." Another said, "You sound entitled, Emily." A third flat out called her spoiled. By 4, she'd edited the post to clarify, but the damage was done. Screenshots were already floating around in group chats. Someone even sent me one of her old college friends' replies. "Maybe you should be more careful about burning bridges with the only person who ever paid your tolls." At 6, Julie and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel again. "Heads up. Emily's calling around trying to get people to take the post down. She's panicking." Julie smiled. She's realizing she doesn't have control anymore. And that was the thing. For the first time, I could see the cracks forming in the little unspoken alliance my family had always had against me. By Monday morning, the storm had shifted direction. Emily wasn't raging anymore. She was scrambling. At 7:32 a.m., she texted me for the first time since Friday. No caps, no insults. Just, "Can we talk, please?" At 7:41, another came through. I shouldn't have said what I said at dinner. It was just a joke. Let's not let this get bigger than it is. Julie read them over my shoulder. She's not apologizing for the Facebook post. She's not apologizing for anything. I said, she's trying to reset the board before it gets worse for her. At 8, I got a call from my Uncle Rick, a man who hadn't called me in 3 years, except to ask for money. I just want you to know, he said in a lowered voice. I didn't think what Emily said was funny. I only laughed because your mom did. By 8:20, my aunt messaged me with something similar. For the record, I didn't mean to offend Julie. I thought it was just harmless teasing. It was almost funny. They weren't apologizing for how they treated me. They were trying to distance themselves from Emily now that they saw which way the wind was blowing. By 9:15, Rachel called. You should know they're turning on her fast. I've never seen them throw someone under the bus like this. I think they're scared you'll cut them off the way you cut her off. By 11, Emily tried a new approach. This time, it was a wall of text, almost 500 words, about how this trip was crucial for her future, how she'd learned her lesson, and how, if I just helped her this one last time, she'd never ask for anything again. Julie took my phone, read it twice, and smirked. She's made that exact promise before, word for word. Remember when it was about the Cancun trip? At 2, the twist landed. An email from the Overseas Programs Finance Department popped into my inbox. Subject line: regarding Emily Carter's enrollment. The message confirmed my payment reversal and added that Emily had contacted them that morning to find a new sponsor. They'd refused, citing previous payment disputes. Translation: she'd been flagged as too risky, and even if someone else wanted to pay now, they wouldn't take her. Julie leaned in, reading over my shoulder. She's not just out of money. She's locked out of the program entirely. By 3:30, Mom called again. No anger this time, just a careful tone. Lucas, she's willing to say sorry to everyone if you'll help her. An hour later, Rachel texted. Emily told me she's ready to apologize to you publicly if that's what it takes. That stopped me for a second. Public apologies didn't happen in my family. Ever. If she was even willing to offer that, she must have been drowning. Julie looked at me like she was reading my mind. You've got her cornered. But what you do next decides whether this is just a win or the moment they finally start respecting you for good. She was right. I wasn't just holding a grudge anymore. I was holding the power they'd all assumed they'd always have over me. When Rachel told me Emily was willing to apologize publicly, I knew I couldn't waste the moment. My family had always operated on the unspoken rule that I was the one who would bend, never them. This was my one chance to flip that dynamic forever. I texted Emily, public apology at dinner this Friday, in front of everyone. No excuses. Her reply came in less than 10 seconds. Fine. No smiley face, no sarcasm, just one word. Julie and I showed up at my mom's house that Friday, like we were walking into a high-stakes poker game. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even the ones who only came around when there was food or drama. The energy in the room was different. Some people wouldn't meet my eyes. Others looked like they were waiting for a show. Dinner was quiet, unnervingly so. Usually my family could talk over each other for hours, but that night the only noise was the clinking of silverware. Emily kept glancing my way like she was trying to time her move. Halfway through dessert, she stood up. Her voice was steady at first, but I could see her fingers tightening around the edge of her plate. I want to apologize to my brother. What I said at his engagement dinner was wrong, and it wasn't a joke. I've taken too much from him over the years and given nothing back. That changes now. The room went still. Even Matt wasn't smirking. I let the pause stretch just long enough for it to get uncomfortable. Then I said, apology accepted. But there's something everyone here should hear. I will never again give a single dollar to anyone in this family without respect. If you can't give that, don't ask. A few people shifted in their seats. My mom opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. But I wasn't done. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and placed it face up on the table. Just so we're clear, I saved screenshots of everything. The posts, the messages, the jokes. If anyone here forgets tonight's lesson, I'll be happy to remind them. Julie didn't take her eyes off them, and I'll make sure the reminders are public. It was a bluff, mostly, but I watched the way faces changed, how they avoided eye contact. It landed. After dinner, Mom walked us to the door. She hesitated before speaking. "You really meant all that, didn't you?" "I did," I said. "And I always will." Over the next month, things shifted. The quick favor calls stopped. The casual insults disappeared. When someone needed something, they asked carefully. And sometimes they didn't ask at all. Emily didn't go to Spain. She picked up a part-time job for the first time in years, working weekends at a bookstore. She never thanked me for the things I'd done before, but she never tried to humiliate me again either. And I think the reason is simple. For the first time, they'd all had to imagine what their lives looked like without me holding it together. Julie summed it up best one night as we sat on the couch. "You didn't just win, Lucas. You changed the rules." I smiled. Good. They needed new rules. 3 months passed after that dinner. Things had been quiet. Too quiet. No requests for loans. No veiled insults at family gatherings. Emily kept her head down, working weekends at the bookstore, posting pictures of latte art instead of subtweets. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't a 24/7 emergency hotline. I'd started to think maybe the whole thing was finally over, that I'd closed the book for good. Then last Thursday, I got a call from Rachel. "You sitting down?" she asked. I was in my office at work, sipping coffee. "What now?" "It's Emily. She's dating someone. And it's not just anyone. It's a guy from her overseas program. He's back in the States." I didn't think much of it at first until Rachel added, "He's been telling people Emily almost didn't get to meet him because her brother pulled the plug on her trip. Now she's spinning it like you regret doing it." I had to laugh. Of course she is. But the weird part came later that day. Julie's phone buzzed. A text from Emily, short and polite. "Can we have dinner sometime? I want to talk about something important." Julie raised an eyebrow. She's never invited us anywhere before. We agreed to meet her at a small cafe downtown. She was already there when we arrived, sitting at a table with 2 cappuccinos and a man I'd never seen before. Early 30s, dressed like someone who owned exactly one nice jacket and wore it everywhere. "This is Daniel," Emily said. "We're engaged." I nearly choked on my coffee. 3 months after I stopped her from going abroad, she'd still managed to find her fairy tale ending. Except now, she was smiling in that calculated way I knew too well. She leaned forward. "Daniel and I were thinking, you and Julie should come to the wedding. It's in Italy." Julie blinked. "Italy? You mean the country you couldn't get into because you couldn't pay for Spain?" Emily ignored that. "We just wanted to give you the first opportunity to be part of it and, of course, help us make it happen." There it was. The ask. Dressed up in lace and romance. But still the same play. I sat back in my chair smiling. "I'll think about it. And I will. But not in the way she's hoping. Because if Emily thinks she can rewrite the ending of this story, she's forgotten one important detail. I'm the one holding the pen now.